Hey guys, so in the last video we had a look at how can we get the files as well as the contents of the files from that are related to a GitHub pull request, which is all good and well. Then we also looked at how to integrate with the AWS Bedrock's API in order to actually invoke a large language model such as the Meta's Ollama models. How do we invoke it using the AWS Bedrock API from the Go application, and then actually get some response back related to how the code can be improved, right? Some suggestions about it. So in this session or in this video, we're going to take it a level further. So we're going to now take that comment that's coming from the large language model and post it as a comment to the actual pull request on GitHub. So that is going to be the last piece of this application from a code point of view. After that, I'm going to talk you guys through some sort of few tips and pointers on refactoring the code, and I'll walk you through some of it. And we'll then also briefly look at how to do some unit test, especially when working with HTTP requests in a Go language application, because working with APIs and sending HTTP requests and dealing with them is pretty common when you're working with Go. So it would be, I believe it would be a good it would be a good content for people to actually learn and educate themselves about. And lastly, but not the least, we'll also be looking at how can we containerize this Go application. So I'll talk you guys through how to write up a Docker file and then actually run it in Docker and sort of do the same thing, where basically trigger it based on a pull request event, even when it's running inside a container, because we can then build on it in the next video and actually deploy this app out into Kubernetes. So we'll look into that in future, but for now this is the scope of this video. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started. So we saw that in the last video we basically had we invoked the Bedrock the invoke model service from the Bedrock sub package, and then we got LLM response. Now we are actually going to be looking at how do we use this LLM response. So the first thing we need to do here is that we need to define a new function that is going to be responsible for posting the comment out to GitHub's pull request. So let's define, just like we did previously, we'll do post comment as a function name, for example. We'll leave the function parameter section empty for now, and we'll build it. I'll copy paste some of the things that we've already done in the past, but as you can see, it's a bit repeated, so we'll look at how we can optimize this and refactor it a bit. I just wanted to do it in a very laid out, simple, plain manner where I'm repeating things, just to not get anybody confused, especially somebody who's coming at the very fresh level at Go language. Don't want to overwhelm. But we'll look at refactoring it, because obviously as you're writing your code, or if you're writing your code base, you want to make sure that you are reusing things where it makes sense to, right? So, and another note on this api.github.com, and this is something I probably should have covered in the last two videos in this series, but I didn't, because you may be wondering how do I know which endpoint to hit, what do I need to substitute, and things like that, right? Which is actually quite useful to know. So I'll show you how that's basically being done. So just go to Google and search for GitHub REST API documentation, right? So once you search for that, you can go in there, and there is like a whole lot of information. We are only interested in the pull request, so I'll just go in there and go into review comments for pull request. So by default, you can see that this is for listing the review comments in a repository, right? But we actually need the method for creating them. So let's go to create. And there are different for their different route for basically everything that we've got in here, right? Now, one thing to note, and this could be down to your subject, it could be down to personal preference basically. So every pull request within GitHub is actually an issue. However, this is the important bit, is that not every issue is a pull request. But it's good to just keep using issues rather than the pulls path, because pulls path is very specific, whereas with issues you can tackle both, right? So if you wanted to have a generic GitHub bot that could comment and automatically analyze things for issues and also for pull requests, right? Then you could just run it against that same API endpoint, whether it's issues or comments doesn't really matter. Issues or pull requests doesn't really matter. So because of that, I'm going to actually go into this create an issue comment, and we are actually going to be going and using this particular endpoint in here, right? So let's go back to our code, and so this thing is what we're going to get rid of, and we're going to copy paste the path that we have in here. And actually we need to, let me undo some of that. What we really want to get rid of is up to this bit, because api.github.com remains the same, because this is still GitHub's API, right? Now we actually don't need to separate things for it. So get rid of this, and we're going to put in person S. The reason being, if I go back, we need to pass the owner and the repo. Now, this is basically the equivalent of the repository full name field that we have been using so far anyway. Both of them come from that same field, so we'll just use that. And then we've got the issue number, which is basically the pull request number. And then we've got the comments. So issue number, as we've used in the past, we have basically replaced this with person D. Don't need that. So from our actual variable that we need to pass in here, we need to pass in the full name still, and then we need to pass in the PR number, both of which we already have. We know that. So I'm going to go ahead here and do full name to string. And I've got PR number, which is going to be my int. Then I've got the request, which is a new request, and then I'm setting the token. So I know that the token is also a string, and I have access to that information too. Now I'm going to be doing some error handling. And then I'm going to be looking at so basically quite a lot of copy paste, and I'll explain through it. Well, it's basically the same thing that we're doing in the past, to be honest. I'm just going to be sending a post request in this case, and we don't really want to return any of this in here. We just want to throw the error, because there's nothing to return. We just post a comment and that's it. There's nothing for us to return or store a variable into, or store something into another variable, right? There's no need for that here. And we don't really need to read the body either. Okay, cool. So here we have set up this post request. We created it. Oh, actually, this should be posted here. And this is not going to be nil anymore, but here is where we're going to be coming in. So first thing we need to know is, let's call a variable, initialize a variable called payload, right? Now what is payload? Payload is going to be what we get back. And what do we get back? So we get back basically a comment from the LLM, which is a massive string. And we need to send that as the body of the post request. So this is going to be our payload. So we're saying that, so we're creating a map in Golang. So map is basically dictionary, you can say. If you're coming from like Python, or if you're coming from JavaScript, it's just an object. So the first item within this square brackets represent the key. So we're saying here that the key is a type of string, and then we're saying the value for that is also a type of string. And then to define the actual key value pair, you use the curlies. We're saying that we're sending the body, as we're basically using body as the key, and then let's say the comment from LLM is our actual value for that key. Now let's go in and pass in comment, which is also a string, and also should pass in the writer, which you can just copy paste from here. So let's copy that. Right, so now we got our payload, and what do we do with this payload? So since we're actually sending, this time we're actually going to be sending data from our application to GitHub, so we need to make sure that we encode this string data into with JSON encoded, basically, so that it's a slice of byte that gets sent over. So to do that, let's create, we're going to have to do JSON marshalling here, similar to what we did in the Bedrock package, if you guys remember, where we basically had to go in and do some marshalling here. So this is the marshalling where we actually, the body in this case was basically a JSON encoded version of the request, which was nothing but the prompt. So the actual prompt containing our code content from the files that were attached to the pull request. So we're going to do something similar in here, JSON payload, and let's say this is going to be JSON. We're going to marshal it, and let's just do payload. So what we're doing here is that we're just marshalling, or we're JSON encoding the actual comment that's coming in from the large language model as the body. And after that, let's also do some error handling. So we're going to do if error doesn't equal to nil. We're going to come in here, and we're just going to, yeah, let's just do print f, and we're going to say couldn't marshal the request. Space, and we're going to do error. And then we're just going to do a return here, similar to what we did. And right, but the JSON payload, once we have it, now we need to actually send that as our body in the next step. So this is not going to be nil anymore in here, but instead this is going to be a string of JSON payload, right? Now you can see that. So what string does is that string would basically take that encoded slice of JSON data and convert it into a string. However, this actually, as you can, if you can read in here, it's basically saying that we need to pass in an reader interface in order to actually send the data over a HTTP request. So what we need to do here is, if I open this up, we need a reader instance, but we need to be able to read from a string. So if I come down in here, so what we need, if the body is of type bytes, then use the buffer, then, or you could use the bytes reader. But if the body is of type string, in our case, we want to use a strings reader. So this is what we're basically going to be used. We're going to use a strings reader. But this is obviously the actual type. What we need to use is the actual function for it. So, which goes something like this. So it uses the strings module, and then it uses the new reader. So you can see that the return for that is actually a strings.reader, which is what we just looked at in the new request. So what I'm going to do is pass this. So the string of the JSON encoded data gets passed into the new reader, which basically returns strings.reader data type, and that is what then gets sent as the body of the request. Then next, as previously, we're just setting our token here, and response, this is where we're actually firing off the post request, and we're doing some error handling. And then lastly, all we need to do is just deal with the response, basically, so that this is not causing any issues anymore. So let's go and let's do some logging here, and let's just do posted comment successfully. And what we're going to do here is also look at tap into the status code. So we just do, and then since it's a post, we're basically looking at a status code of 201. So we're here saying that if the error is not nil and the status code actually does not equal to 201, then we know that there is some issue, something went wrong, and we could not post the comment. But otherwise, we're just going to log this one out. In our application logs, we can see that it will say poster comment successfully, and of course, we'll check our pull request as well to verify that the comment has come through. Right, so let's go ahead and actually now trigger this, because we know that everything else is already working. So I'm going to go ahead, run my application, go to run and debug, do the launch package. Okay, of course. Let me clear this off. So what's missing here is that obviously I did not actually pass my response in or invoke the comment at all, invoke the post comment function at all. So we're going to invoke this, pass in the repository full name in here, and then we're going to pass in the pull request number, then we're going to pass in the GitHub token, then we're going to pass in the actual LLM response, which is string, and then lastly we're going to pass in the writer. Now that is everything, and now we should be able to go ahead and actually launch our package. Now when this is running, I'm going to actually hit up a breakpoint just to show how it's all working, and we'll step through it. But let's go ahead and actually trigger and close this off for now. Let's reopen the pull request. We'll come back to our app now. And we can see, let's look at the LLM response. We can see that we still have the suggestion from the large language model. Now let's step right into it. So we can go into the URL, we can look into our payload. So I'll just show you what the payload actually in here is. So the payload is just basically a map. So if you can see that it's a keys body, and this is just a comment for it. And if I actually now step over it, you'll see that the JSON payload is just encoded version of this this string in here. So all of this is basically just a slice of bytes. That's all it is. And obviously there is no error, so we'll just step right through it. So our request is now, let's collapse them. So the request is in here, and if we expand it, we can see that the method is post. Our URL is what we have got, and the body data is basically a string reader. So you can see that it's a strings reader, and that's passing in the exact same string that we've got, and with the body. So you're basically sending the JSON message, but as a string over the HTTP request. And lastly, we'll go ahead and actually, let's go ahead and run it. And we can see that the poster comment successfully has just come through. So we're now going to go back in here, and you can see that our comment has just appeared as well. So there you go. So this is the large language model responding back with its feedback. And Probably don't need that. We could enhance this further by setting some additional prompt to the model saying that do not send me any code snippet. Because ideally, when you are using it as a review or using a bot as a review, you really want this points, and then you want to actually take that into consideration and decide what you really want to implement, whether it makes sense. But you don't really need the code or optimized code or anything like that. It's probably best practice not to just borrow the code from large language model anyway, right? You should think about it as you implement things. Right, so going back to the code now. So now we've actually completed our code. However, as you can see, we've reused quite a lot of things. It's not the most ideal. So we're going to go and do some refactoring, mainly in this webhook package, as this is where bulk of the code is. The main.go is already pretty minimal. There's not much to do. The Bedrock sub package, there is not really much to commonize in here. It's just doing something really as a one-off. So there's no benefit in trying to make that any more smaller or trying to commonize anything. Right, so now we are going to go and see. So the most common things that we've got in here. So this webhook handle func that we've got, there is not really much room for consolidating anything in here, because this is sort of the, like, we're looping over here. It's not like we are we can commonize this for loop, right? We still have to do it. We still have to go through each file and check that the file actually is within the supported languages, that actually get the content for that file individually, and then for the content of that file invoke the model. So all of this you can't really consolidate any further. However, you can see that we're passing in similar type of variables into pretty much all of them, all of these functions. And we can also look at this function and see, like, post comment, and we just look at get file content. We can see that there's quite a lot of repeat or repetition going on in here, such as setting up the URL, then setting up the request, doing the error handling, reading the response from the body. There's slight difference with this post request, that's for sure, but we can certainly make some of it more common, right? So what we're going to do, actually, the get files and the get file content are much more similar, right? So we could certainly make some reduction in our code up to, so this bit of code in theory can become a single function or an entity of its own that we could reuse. So let's go ahead and do that for now. So we'll copy this, and let's say we're going to define a function in here, and let's say con request, and we are going to, let's just paste it in here for now, and we're going to pass all of this as input, right? So this is going to take your URL, and we're going to then give this the same. So this we will do at the individual function level, because the URL is something that's changing. The token we could just pass in here. So let's give, so URL is going to be a string type. We know token is also going to be a string type. So the request gets created and sent. We can also pass the writer in here. So the writer's type is http.response writer. We don't really need to send anything back in here. Well, actually, we do want to, we want to return the body in here. So let's say we want to return an array of byte. So Our return here is going to be an array of byte and error. So from here, we really want to just do nil, error. Once we're here, we just want to do nil, error, defer it, and lastly, we just want to do return body, nil. So now we could use this command request function in, so let's get rid of all of these up until the URL, and here we're going to do command request, we're going to pass in the URL, pass in the token, we're going to pass in the writer, and writer, that's it. And we're going to do body, error is this, and we're just going to do if equal to, if error doesn't equal to nil, then just come down in here, and we're just going to, so let's do a HTTP error here, and we'll just do return nil, error. Cool, there you go. So now we have reduced this function quite a lot, and let's go and just simply copy paste this in the get file content function as well. So again, same here, all of this is the same. Let's get rid of this, and we actually don't need it. It's going to be just nil, and we don't need this either. Oops, in here we're actually returning string, aren't we? Yeah, so this actually should just be string, and in here we got the error handling. Okay, cool. So now we've got this a bit more refactored, and we can just go ahead and actually I should be using a new line here. Cool, because there's nothing really to format here. So if I go ahead and run my app again, and I'll actually go ahead and delete this from here, and I'm also going to be closing the pull request off, and now I'm going to be reopening it, and we should see shortly it should work, and we should see a comment basically pop up in here. There you go. Right, so now that we've got this working, we're now going to go ahead and we're going to be looking at how can we write some tests. And yeah, basically, well, I'm going to take a couple of methods in here, and I'm going to be writing unit tests on it. I'll talk you through briefly on some practices around it. I'll show you how to mock the HTTP client, and a little bit more refactoring, right? The main thing I want to touch on now is this default client. We shouldn't really be using the default client, and instead I should be passing in an type of HTTP client as a parameter to the function and use that instead, because this will just make things easy to mock, and especially if you're working with HTTP across a large footprint in your code base, right? You want an easy way to mock things. You don't want to use the default client because that's shared globally. So mocking it in one place means you're also going to affect the HTTP client that's being used somewhere else, right? It's very hard to isolate it, but yeah, we'll look at that.